Jeroen Rietberg is the owner of Intellex Dynamic Reporting. He's been buying from, managing in, and supplying to the MR industry for nearly 20 years. And so Phil tells me, I think he lied about the years though, he formed market and research data consultants, probably so he could set up companies in Malaysia, Thailand, and the Philippines, which he so enjoys visiting. With an interesting case study of another insurer who are optimizing data, please welcome Jeroen and Phil. All yours, chaps.
Right, good morning, everybody. I was going to introduce myself, and Phil, of course, but that's already done, so I'm going to skip the next slide, which tells you exactly who's Phil and who's Jeroen, and we're going to start off straight away. So, as you are probably all aware, we have in Europe and the States been in a slight financial crisis for a couple of years now. And the good news is that we are crawling out of it, apparently. And if you listen to interviews with CEOs of the big brands, if you read books, if you listen to them talk, then you can also hear that it is time to stop sitting on the money and that they are starting to think about investing. And one of the key themes for investing money at the moment is customer centricity. I think the previous speaker had an excellent example of this. So all the main brands are currently wondering how they can put the customer central in their strategy. And the question that we would like to give you is, so who is in the best position to help these brands, to help these companies to understand their customers better so they can actually put that client in that central position where they want the client to be? Now, this is a question that my 14-year-old daughter would answer with a very American duh, because of course it's us, right? It is market research. If big organizations around the globe are putting the customer central in their strategies and in their investments, then market research should be in an absolute pole position for the future, because who else is going to answer these questions for these big brands and organizations? So, if that is the case, how then is it possible that investments that went into alternative technologies from market research were about a factor 10 higher in the year 2014 than the investments that actually went into market research itself? The chart on the screen is not about the hard, factual data. Don't ask me exactly, what was the turnover. What the chart shows you is that, of course, as we all know, the amount of data that floats around is going to go up and up, whereas the actual turnover globally in market research is a flattening curve. So if we push that line into the future, we see that the gap between the available amount of data that people will want to understand and the role that market research plays in that is widening and will keep on widening. So if I take a little step back, about 5 years ago, Intellex did a little survey amongst research buyers. In Europe, we spoke to about 100 research buyers and we asked them about market research. What is the quality of market research? What do you think about what you get delivered? And one of the questions we asked is, does the quality of the report that you are receiving, is that quality as high as the quality of the research that preceded it? And a large majority of research buyers said no, that is not the case. We know that excellent research has been done, but the quality of the report that delivers that does not live up to the quality of that research. The other question that we asked is, do you think that senior management in your organization is convinced of the strategic relevance, the added value of market research? And again, a vast majority said no. We don't think senior management is convinced. And we've seen that, of course. We've seen that because during the crisis, market research was one of the first things that suffered. So there is a lot of worry in the market research world about this strategic relevance. Where is it going? What is happening with the work that we're doing? We've been following this sentiment over the years, and also this year and last year we've been talking about what is strategic relevance for market research and how exactly does it work. And the worry has not gone away. If anything, it has grown. So what do the market research professionals that we speak to think are the biggest worries that they see in the market, the biggest threats? So what we see here is dark clouds over the horizon, gathering over the strategic relevance of market research, and the themes, of course, are clear and very recognizable. What's interesting is that what we see here, the customer-owned panels, the mobile, the social listening, big data, of course, are all so-called disruptive innovations. So if you look at disruptive innovation, an innovation is normally based on the core competences of an industry. As market researchers, we all have core competences. We know our strength, we know where we're coming from, but a disruptive innovation tends to come from the outside. It sneaks up on you, it is often based on different technology, and the danger of a disruptive innovation is that it can make your competences into weaknesses. As an example, customer-owned panels, they've been around for years and years. And what market research has been doing for years and years, it has been questioning the statistical relevance, the representativeness of these panels. That, of course, is a core competence, statistics. That is what we do. We're market researchers, and we're trying to tell the client that maybe they're doing the wrong thing. So why are so many clients saying, well, we don't care that we're doing the wrong thing. We want our consumer panels because we can get answers in a day that you, market researchers, can only give us in a couple of weeks. The same, of course, for the social listening. The question that we have to ask is data collection the only core competence of market research? Because all of these shifts, these enormous technology shifts, take place in the area of data collection. The answer, of course, is no. Market research is not just about data collection. Market research is also about what do you do with that data. And now I'm going to pose an extreme open door statement to you, because if I say this, the reaction I always get isn't that a bit of an open door? And the answer is yes, but it's an open door that market researchers tend to overlook. Relevance of what you do depends on usage. I can't make it any more complex than that. If the work that you do is not used by the client, it can never be relevant. If it's used, it will be relevant. So all these core competences that we have in market research, all the things that we focus on, they do not necessarily answer the question that the client is asking himself every single day. How can I best use all these data that are floating around? The data are pouring down, they fall into all sorts of different containers. What to do with it? How to use it? And which core competence of market research is at the heart of usage? It is, of course, reporting. It is our opinion that the reporting side of market research has always been overlooked. It is something like an afterthought, right? And this should change. If market research wants to keep the strategic relevant position or wants to improve the strategic relevance position that they have, then they should start thinking differently about the way how they deliver their results. Of course, this is a bit black and white, but 9 out of 10 times, surely, market researchers do their work, they write the report, and then the report is delivered to the buyer, who is often the market researcher, and that is it, right? We do not understand what happens with our results after that. And what you want is you want to see that ripple. You want to understand that if you deliver a report, something happens with that. Something is actually done. And that is what we mean by operationalizing data, operationalizing results. It means that you actually facilitate the usage. You do not just deliver a report, you start to understand how to deliver it. It is not just about what you can do for your customer, it is all about what your customer can do with what you do for the customer. So, one way of looking at that is, can you maybe do more with what you have? We all know the story about the human brain. It's not true, actually. I heard recently, I always thought it was true. Films have been made about it, you know. If only we had the full capacity of our brain, we would be capable of the most magnificent things. But sadly, it is somewhere between 10 and 20%. 20% is maybe only the smartest of us. We don't use the full capacity of our brain. And it's the same with market research data. Every single market research agency is sitting on a goldmine of information. Are you doing everything you can do with what you have? Think about how you can enrich what you are giving to your client using more. Another thing that I like to do, and I've done that before in other presentations, is compare market research to chefs in a Michelin star restaurant. We are all experts. We know our trade. We know the recipes. We know what ingredients to use. We know exactly what we do. High quality work is done in the market research kitchen. And then you would expect this high quality work to be turned into delicious little Michelin-worthy morsels. One little bite for everybody, everything different, everybody something to their taste. But sadly, what happens is that market researchers tend to deliver this. And if there's any Dutchies here, it will be recognized as something called boerenkool met worst. It's a fairly unappetizing mix of cabbage and potatoes with a sausage. And in the past, farmers used to sit around the table and all eat from the same pot. And market research reports, if they don't watch it, have a tendency to have the same effect. Here's one report for everybody, and we hope that you find something in there that might be to your liking. We think that it's time to rethink core competences. Of course, data collection is of huge importance. There are shifts taking place that cannot be ignored, but data are still data and they will need to be interpreted and reported, and it is time that we start to focus on that in order to make sure that what we do remains relevant. And I will now hand over to Phil, who will kick off the example of Aviva, where we implemented a dashboard.
So I'd like to introduce you to Aviva. They're a global insurance company. It's not all about insurance today, I don't think, on the program. They're working on 3 continents and have offices and operations in selective markets. As I think probably Ari would back me up on, that in the insurance sector, the buyers of the different products that are offered are quite differently viewed by those customers. There's a different image sometimes of the companies for buyers of different products. The customers themselves have a different profile, and indeed the interactions that the customers have with Aviva are different. Somebody buying a long-term investment plan would probably have a different interaction from somebody who's under pressure making a motor insurance claim. Our first connection with Aviva was something like 6 years ago, and they came to us. They were had a project being handled by a UK agency across 17 markets, and had been collecting that data for 5 or 6 years. And they had a survey called Customer Attitudes to Savings, which was run, I think, 3 times a year and 2 times a year in the earlier stages. And they had a need to get that data so that it was more accessible to different offices around the world. As it was all controlled from the UK, if somebody in Singapore, for example, wanted some additional data, it had to be requested to the UK. The UK had to ask the research agency and then pass it back down the line to Singapore. And what we achieved for Aviva was to coordinate that data, put it into our Reflect software, which is a piece of software that allows people to do additional cross-tabulations. So they could select new cross-tabulations on different filters and so on. And the more advanced users could start to build variables and do more complex data analytics. This helped, and it certainly helped the local offices to get more from the research data, and indeed Aviva declared it a success in that they rolled this out on 2 other global projects that they handled, and we managed that data for them. And again, this meant there was a bit more value in the research that was being conducted. The progress from this was that we started to do some automated reporting for Aviva, and also some aggregated data from internal data mixed with research data, and placing that into Excel or Word documents or PDFs. But most of these requests were ad hoc and solved sort of short-term problems. They didn't really improve the flow of research data and data within Aviva itself. And perhaps if there was a sort of moment when the amount of data that Aviva were being asked to handle, and when there was a need to make a change in the way they were operating, sort of came when, I'm sure it's something we've all done, when a senior manager or senior marketing manager there was finding he was spending increasing amounts of time copying and pasting data from different sources into spreadsheets, and perhaps constructing sort of simple dashboards in Excel so that he could communicate data to perhaps the chief marketing officer or other colleagues around the world. And if you're like me, I'm sure you've been in a situation where you've decided to do something complex in Excel or time-consuming in Excel because it's quicker to do it yourself than explain it to someone more junior who could probably do it probably more accurately than yourself, but you don't. You tend to just wallow on handling this sort of data. So there was a need for some change, and I think this is where the dashboard concept first was born. They approached us and asked us if we could do this. We could certainly manage the data, but we partnered with Jeroen's company, Intellex, who we worked with for several years, and their expertise was in actually pulling a dashboard together that could coordinate all this data. What was happening before the dashboard was born was that they started going from sort of spreadsheets of figures to things that look like this. I know on the BBC News in the UK, if there's any flash photography, you're warned to look away. If you get things like that, I think you're probably also warned to look away as well. But the brainstorming was then started so that we could start to pull together a dashboard that gave Aviva what they needed in their different offices around the world and for their different users. And one of the first things that come out, I think, was that at a senior level was that people wanted to get data while they were on the move, and mobile availability of data was something that was becoming increasingly important to them. So they couldn't just turn up at a meeting with a spreadsheet. They actually wanted to dive into the data and drill down into that data in live situations. Of course, when you carry out brainstorming, the next thing that happens is there's chaos. And I think we called this something a little bit more positive. Divergent needs, I think, was the term that we used to explain what was going on. And what we found was that different users of the data around the world had different uses. Some people had very product-specific data that they wanted to get. Others had very country-specific data that they wanted. Some people wanted quite high-level data, giving an overview of the business and progress. And others went into quite detailed, low-level data. And one of the first things that transpired was that different users of the data had different requirements and wanted a different entry point when they logged into the system. And we quickly realized it's important that different users could have different views when they logged in and could customize their own view and share those views with colleagues who were possibly more senior or they worked with. So into the first dashboard were two of the three surveys that we were involved in. Also, customer comments were pulled in, both from market research surveys and from other touch points where Aviva were collecting data such as claims and policy renewals. So that data was also pulled in, text comments. And of course, a whole stack of internal data such as sales, policy renewals, quarter-to-quarter losses and gains from different offices around the world. To pull that together, it needed someone strong at Aviva to help us pull the information together. But by a strong leader, I don't mean somebody who's stubborn and inflexible. It needed someone who could identify what the different needs were around the world and to try and cut out anything that was not needed. It's very easy to get a committee together and everyone puts their hand up and say they need that. But actually, it's important to identify what is really needed. Our role in this with Jeroen was to rationalise that and try and get to something that made the user experience when using a dashboard straightforward and practical whilst giving them enough information. The data that was going into the dashboard was centralised through us, and this brought in quite a lot of low-level detail that was needed. For example, files that were sent from different countries around the world giving different key performance indexes had to be standardized. It's no good people sending spreadsheets through now that had an extra column or an extra row put in where somebody had put cryptic comments. Everything needed to be in a much more rigorous format so it could feed into the dashboard and be easily available to different people. Also, comments that came from research companies, they had to be regularized and put through to us in a standard format as well so that they could be fed into the dashboard efficiently. And the survey data from the two research agencies involved was provided in SPSS format, and that had to be to some conformity as well, such that variable names were in some convention and data wasn't changed from quarter to quarter in any way. And if there's anything I'm going to do that means I need to bang my fist on the table like the best politicians, as you do, I think it's that research agencies need to improve in this area. I've seen complete extremes where I know of one research agency who has appointed someone whose job is to see these global tracking studies from start to finish, from field work through to data, and then when there's a questionnaire change, that's actually tested out all the way through the process before it goes to field, so that when the data arrives with us, we know what's going to happen and any changes can be applied before the final data comes through. Right through to companies who, if I'm honest, sort of treat these global tracking studies like lots of ad hoc surveys, sort of sending the data each quarter in a badly thought out way, making it prone to error. And these projects have to work to a strict timetable, so there's a lot of pressure on research agencies to deliver. if they're 1 or 2 weeks late in field for some good or bad reason, it's important that that's caught up, because people are expecting these dashboards to be published with all the data from both Aviva's internal data and the research agencies available at the same time. So at this point, I'm going to hand back to Jeroen, who's going to take you through some of the visual aspects of the dashboard itself.
So the first step that we took was simplify, and of course we also have to say here that if you want to operationalize your data, that mobile is of course in the area of reporting as important as it is these days in the areas of data collection. Again, this is something that is often forgotten or not spoken about when we talk about the role of mobile in market research, but it must be clear that if you build your reports about report in a mobile environment that people can actually access data while they're on the move, that this hugely improves the usability of what you are actually delivering. The first step is simplify, make clear choices, and another thing that you have to realize if you start thinking about who is actually using the data, that the results that you deliver, is that it's not market researchers, that a vast majority of the users of your research are not market researchers, and that they do often not have the time, the patience, or the skill set to interpret tables, and they would prefer graphical understanding. Charts are okay, but certainly don't get too detailed. So when you do a dashboard, step one is the opening screen is the home page. What's on the home page is by definition important. So you have to start making choices. What do you put on the home page? And as you can see, we, together with Aviva, of course, there was a very clear and easy choice. We only take 2 KPIs, we put them on the home page, and we put country markers on the global map, and each marker explains to you immediately in one view how things are going where in the world. If you want to know why, you simply click on the marker and it will run a country report, a market report across all KPIs for that particular country. So the full detail is just a click away. The second step is to identify. Identify means who is using the information and what are they going to do with it. So the next step down into the dashboard is, and I'm sorry about the quality of the screenshots, it's not very clear, but we go one step down where we actually have an overview of not 2 but 6 KPIs out of the entire group. We have markets listed there, and again a first graphical overview with simple markers that tell you if things are going up or down or are stable. One of the requirements was we need to be able to take this into meetings, so it's possible of course to export straight to PDF or to PowerPoint. For people who want more detail, who are more interested in deeper analysis, there is a simple option to say, I don't want these arrows, I want to see the underlying detail. One click and the arrows will be replaced with the actual numbers and the trend information that goes with it, and these numbers are exportable to Excel. Sharing information was another important issue. You should be able to see something that worries you or that you like and to share that information immediately. So there is a direct emailing option that says, I want to share this information. You type in the email address of a colleague and you send that particular information and you can talk about it straight away. Personalizing is a third step. We were faced with a situation where across the globe there were many people who would be using this information regularly, but who were not necessarily interested in the global view or in the market view. In the market view, they were just interested in the little bit that they were responsible for. So what we did is we built an option into the reporting platform that allows these users to build their own personalized dashboards. In a very simple way, they simply get the choice to say, I want to create a dashboard, give it a name. Then they get a selection of which market they're interested in. They select the market, or more if they want to make comparisons. Then they select the performance indicators that they would like to see in the dashboard. And I can see, I don't know if you can see it, but the bottom screen has got charts in, if I see it in my own PowerPoint, but they seem to have disappeared. Anyway, the idea is that, I don't know how that happens. The idea is that every individual user can create their own dashboard that focuses on their market and their KPIs, and they can save those dashboards so that when new data flow in, they simply have to call up the dashboard that they're interested in. And if they want, they can make that dashboard into the default that replaces the global map that we saw as the first screen, so that when they log into the system, what they see is their own personal defaulting dashboard, so that wherever they are, they can log in on whatever device they're carrying and find the data. The comments from Craig from Aviva, the senior marketing manager from Aviva, based in London, is that Aviva, according to him, has gone from a company that had lots and lots of numbers that were never used to a company that has a much smaller selection of readily available KPIs, and that he feels that the investment that they do in the research has now finally got the platform that it actually deserved, simply because it is now used. That was right spot on. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, everybody. If there's questions.
Just time for a couple of questions. I think that was a strong wake-up call for market researchers. No question. You've got to write better reports. They're not good enough. And I spend a lot of my life writing reports for people and making sure that people read them and do something with them. Very good wake-up call. One question, please. Shout.
Just shout.
Okay, now.
Being source agnostic and standardizing all these inputs from the different sources, it can, it was put sort of, in a quite short, space of time there. But I know this can be a particular pain point for rolling out something of this magnitude. Any sort of tips or sort of methods in terms of making that process a bit better?
Manage everything in a sensible and easy way, whether that's something as basic as you manage the brand lists in Excel so that brand 37 is always Aviva or whatever it might be. Manage all the statements in lists, because there are different rating scales used around the world in different markets. Just keep things very organised and rigorous, and make your variable names logical as well. If I can get down to this boring level of detail, but a variable called brand 31 underscore statement 26 is a good way of everybody knowing what that means, and it can be used around the world so that all the fieldwork agencies conform to that. And when the data finally comes together, we all know what we're talking about. So it's really just putting rules in place to make sure everything is in a regularised way, and everybody who's involved in the process understands what a variable is and what the data within that variable is, and being very careful if anything has to change for any reason, such as a rating scale changing from a 5-point to a 7-point. You need to start to be very careful then, of course, but it's putting rules in place basically.
Good, thanks very much. Okay, well done.